A major shakeup tonight at Boeing after a string of scary incidents involving the aircraft. The company's CEO announcing today he will step down.
China's government has reportedly ordered its domestic airlines to stop accepting deliveries of Boeing jets and to halt purchases of aircraft parts from the U.S.
We'd like to get that deal done. And I think that's all across the United States, not just those of us from the state of Washington. It's good company, good product.
Overnight machinists at Boeing here in St. Louis are operating without a contract agreement.
Workers have voted down a recent offer, and the current agreement expired at midnight.
What happens if Boeing stops making planes in the U.S.? Who loses the most? Workers, airlines, or you at the ticket counter? Is this a trade fight or a full-blown industry collapse? Listen close. This isn't idle gossip. Boeing is in the eye of a storm. In quarter first, 2025, the company reported a rebound. 130 aircraft delivered, revenue jumped to $19.5 billion, and the backlog swelled to roughly $545 billion. Sounds strong, right? But under the surface, things are breaking fast. Programs like Starliner are crippled, crewed flights pushed out, and the next test now uncrewed, likely in 2026. That's billions of dollars wasted and astronauts forced to hitch rides on rival spacecraft. At the same time, Boeing's 737 MAX push, the plan to ramp to 38 jets per month, keeps slipping because engines and safety checks won't cooperate. Politics crashed into production. New tariff threats have suppliers rerouting parts, stockpiling components, and counting costs. China froze some Boeing deliveries in April 2025 and slapped import duties up to 125% on U.S. aircraft. Imagine that. Whole fleets put on ice while deals hang in the balance. Behind the scenes, negotiators say talks for a massive 500 plane order from China are still alive, a deal that could change everything. But it's fragile and tied to trade pressure. Boeing's first half, 2025 revenue climbed to $42.2 billion. Yet free cash flow stayed negative, and the company still burned billions to stabilize operations. Production numbers matter. Through August 2025, Boeing tallied about 385 deliveries year to date, far behind Airbus, and a 777X program delay means more orders waiting, not flying. Suppliers in Mexico and Canada, who provide engines, composites, and parts, now face tariffs and shifting rules. Boeing warned, a single tariff hit anywhere in the chain can add hundreds of thousands of dollars to a plane and slow every line. Workers are already paying. Boeing cut thousands of jobs across Washington, Missouri, California, and India. Factories are quieter, and some shifts are idled. If political pressure forces Boeing to move more assembly offshore, those numbers could grow. That's why the idea of shutting down U.S. production is gaining traction in message boards and trading floors. Not because Boeing wants to, but because tariffs, broken supply lines, and rising costs could make U.S. assembly uneconomic. This is not abstract. Airlines warn higher costs mean higher fares. Regulators and unions argue national security and safety are at risk when supply chains wobble. Rivals smell opportunity. Airbus is delivering more jets. Comac is creeping into regional markets. And emerging markets are now Boeing's pitch. Southeast Asia alone needs thousands of single-aisle planes in the coming decades. Next, I will show you the shutdown scenario in detail. Which plants are endangered? What happens to the 777 and 737 lines? And how travelers and taxpayers will really pay. Before we jump back in, please hit the like button. We're on a mission to bring together 5,000 curious minds here at Global Insight, and your subscription makes this journey possible. Every click, every new subscriber is a true vote of confidence, and we're deeply grateful for your support. Thank you for helping us grow. Now let's continue. What happens next will hit jobs, travel, and global trade. Why would Boeing, the icon of U.S. industry, suddenly be forced to pause production? How do tariffs, rare earth shortages, and safety scares combine to slam an aircraft maker? Who pays when a plane order goes cold? Workers, travelers, or taxpayers? Boeing's rebound looked real for a moment. Revenue jumped again in mid-2025, and deliveries climbed. But two new forces are colliding and threatening to undo that progress. First, cash flows and backlog numbers are volatile. Boeing reported $22.7 billion in Q2 revenue and $42.2 billion in the first half of 2025, while the company narrowed losses to about $612 million in quarter two and showed a small positive operating cash flow of $227 million. Those figures look encouraging, but buried beneath them are production constraints, delayed programs, and a backlog that keeps stretching out. The commercial backlog reached roughly $619 billion by mid-2025. That backlog is both a lifeline and a pressure cooker. Planes need parts, talent, and timely inspections to turn orders into cash. Deliveries comparison: Boeing versus Airbus. Boeing, 385 deliveries. Airbus, 434 deliveries. That chart is a wake-up call. While Boeing pushes to meet demand, Airbus has higher near-term output. Boeing's mid-2025 production mix shows about 289 737s, 54 787s, 26 777s, and 16 767s delivered YTD, a heavy tilt towards single-aisle jets. But long lead items and supplier constraints keep tripping deliveries. The 787 line still needs stable supplier flows, while the 777X program has missed certification schedules and is now a multi-quarter risk for airlines waiting on long-range wide-bodies. The second force hitting Boeing is geopolitics. Tariff threats, and even talk of extreme levies on aerospace parts, have pushed governments and big buyers to rethink orders. There were dramatic moves in 2025. China at times froze certain Boeing deliveries and imposed punitive duties. At the same time, the U.S. administration explored sweeping tariff tools targeting inputs. Add to that the rare earths squeeze. China controls most high-performance magnet supply, and suddenly avionics, motors, and defense-critical parts become geopolitical bargaining chips that can halt assembly lines overnight. Safe flight matters too. Safety events and regulatory limits are now shaping production plans more than volume targets. FAA caps and heightened oversight mean Boeing can't simply stamp out more jets. Certification, inspections, and retraining are mandatory fixes before ramping production further. The company's supplier base is global. Mexico supplies more than $1 billion in parts annually. Canada and multiple European vendors are essential, and that web can't be tariffed away without causing knock-on delays. Workers and communities are already feeling it. Boeing's workforce reductions rolled through 2024 to 2025 as the company rebalanced operations across states and countries. Factories in Washington, Missouri, and California saw layoffs while international sites trimmed staff as well. Those cuts reduce bench strength just when skilled technicians and inspectors are most needed. If tariffs harden, if China's orders remain uncertain, and if certification delays persist, Boeing faces a triple whammy: lower output, longer cash conversion cycles, and a thinner workforce to catch up. Airlines already digesting higher fuel and ticket costs could delay fleet renewals, which would stretch Boeing's recovery timeline from months to years. Where this leads next, expect more political theater. Governments pushing for exemptions, suppliers lobbying for relief, and Boeing racing to de-risk the supply chain. The company is pivoting. Mexico and other regional partners get more work, and Boeing is aggressively courting orders in South and Southeast Asia to offset China uncertainty. But diversification takes time. New lines, local inspections, and training aren't instant fixes. Right now, Boeing sits at a fork in the road. One path is recovery: orders delivered, workers rehired, and supply chains steadied. The other is a deep stall: production lines slowed, workers sent home, and plane orders stuck on paper. Which path becomes real depends on a few sudden events, and the human cost will be heavy. First, the people. Boeing's U.S. plants and supplier towns are already bruised. Major layoff rounds in 2024 to 2025 cut thousands of roles. Over 2,000 jobs in Washington, nearly 700 in Missouri, roughly 600 in California, and hundreds more across Alabama, South Carolina, and India. Small towns that depend on a Boeing plant don't just lose paychecks. They lose the grocery shoppers, the school volunteers, the local trainers and suppliers. When an aircraft line idles, it's not just technicians out of work. It's local mechanics, cafeteria workers, and hotel staff too. Second, the customer drama. Big potential deals can reverse a crisis, or make it worse. Negotiations with China have swung back and forth. At times, there were signs of a massive 500 plane order. At other times, government freezes and punitive duties left planes in limbo. Indonesia already committed to a modest 50-jet package under a special tariff deal, and airlines in the Middle East and Europe have handed Boeing major contracts in recent months worth many billions. But airlines don't want uncertainty. If a top customer pauses shipments, Boeing faces sudden unsold inventory and a cascade of schedule changes across its global lines. Third, the technical and safety shocks. Starliner program delays and other technical setbacks have already cost time and credibility. One high-profile crash tied to a 787 variant shook regulators and airlines. Major safety scares can ground fleets and force fresh inspections across hundreds of planes. A major grounding order would choke production for months, because regulators demand paperwork, tests, and fixes before any restart. That's not a paper problem. It's a calendar, parts, and staffing problem. So, what exactly would trigger a pause in U.S. production? A sovereign buyer pulling or freezing a giant order. If a country representing a major chunk of future deliveries withdraws, Boeing's ramp plans become unaffordable overnight. A large-scale supplier breakdown, for example, a key avionics or engine maker blocked by export controls, rare earth shortages, or tariffs. A missing motor or magnet can stop a final assembly line. A regulatory grounding or prolonged safety certification failure. If inspectors demand design changes, every plane awaiting final sign-off stalls in the factory. If any one of those happens, or worse, two at once, Boeing could be forced to slow or temporarily halt U.S. production until buyers, regulators, and suppliers sort it out. A halt doesn't just pause output. It forces layoffs, furloughs, and contract cancellations across a network of thousands of firms. But there are fixes. Short-term moves include urgent exemption talks to protect aerospace parts, supplier finance lifelines, and targeted government support for training and inspection staffing. Boeing can accelerate regional production partnerships, move some assembly steps to lower-cost sites, and negotiate phased deliveries so lines keep moving. Those options buy time, but they cost money and take careful coordination. Where this ends depends on politics as much as engineering. If tariffs and tit-for-tat trade moves persist, aircraft production stays fragile. If buyers and governments cut a deal, or if supply chains are protected, the recovery can accelerate. For viewers, that matters not just to investors, but to anyone who flies, works in aerospace towns, or buys a ticket someday. If you want the full human picture, the layoffs, the food chain shocks, and how big companies are being hit across America, I've got a deep dive next. Watch A Big Layoffs and Food Price Hikes, FedEx, Walmart, UPS, Amazon, Costco, Cleveland Cliffs, for the inside stories on workers, stores, and how supply shocks ripple through everyday life. Tap the video on your screen now.